What is up, everybody? Welcome into Hoops 360. On today's episode of the show, we're going to look back on some of the biggest non-con matchups in women's college basketball from this past week. Plus, which conference race are we most excited to watch unfold? And of course, we have heard the WNBA All-Star game will be in Chicago in 2026. But why back so soon? We'll dive into all of that. But before we get into that, we want to send you a reminder that you can send us any questions that you might have, reactions or comments to what we have to say on the show, questions about women's college basketball, the WNBA, unrivaled, anything in the world of women's hoops. We are here for you. So send us your thoughts to hoops360@yahoosports.com. So let's get into it. We have our friend Ava Wallace from the Washington Post back on the show. Ava, always happy to chat with you. Cassandra Nugley is on vacation. We wish her very fun vacay and safe travels home. But we're so happy to have Ava on the show. And Ava, let's get into it because we had some absolute bangers of women's college basketball games over this past week. I know it's recency bias because we're currently in it, but I think early in the non-con might be my favorite time of the women's college basketball season before we get into postseason play.
Especially this year, it seems like teams are really trying to test themselves. You had a lot of good, exciting games that just so happened to come down to the wire, like NC State. Just everybody calm down. We don't need all of that all so soon. But yeah, these the schedules have been excellent so far this year.
You bring it up. NC State, a top 10 team hosting number 18 USC. And it did feel like USC definitely wasn't getting nearly as much buzz going into this season since Juju Watkins is out for the entirety of the season with an ACL tear. But USC gets a narrow victory, 69-68 over NC State, a massive statement win. And we talked about Jazzy Davidson on last week's edition of the show, that she is one of these young freshmen to watch. We've seen freshmen be massive impact players for their teams in the past. I'm looking at Toby Fournier for Duke last year, the ACC Rookie of the Year. I'm looking at Joyce Edwards and her contribution to South Carolina last year. Obviously, Sarah Strong as a freshman last season, she was massive. Jazzy Davidson, 21 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks for the Trojans against NC State. Ava, what are you seeing from this young freshman phenom so far?
Maturity. That is what I was thinking this entire game. Jazzy Davidson had a really bad opener in terms of her shot wasn't falling. I think she was 4 for 16. I think that's right. And even in the first half against NC State, she was not shooting well. She went 1 for 10 in the first half. Followed it up second half, no problem, 7 for 13 from the floor. And that is kind of what happens when you're as talented as she is defensively. She's so long and lanky, and she has such great timing. That's how she ended up with those 3 steals and 5 blocks. But those were kind of veteran defenders she was going up against in NC State, and just her kind of court awareness and just her ability to make quick decisions really impressed me, especially just given the fact that after little bit of a rocky opener offensively, a little bit of a rocky first half, she wasn't forcing anything. It's not like she was kind of sitting back and letting the game come to her, but she was really confident in how she was playing, and she didn't have to go try and make a point or anything like that. I was so impressed with her short memory, I would guess. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about being a freshman. When I covered Maryland, Brenda Fries would always say, freshmen don't even know what they don't know. They just don't care. They're just like, whatever, I have no baggage. I'm just playing basketball. And it really seemed like Jazzy Davidson has a good helping of that.
That's a fascinating perspective that, frankly, I haven't really thought about. Because I think about Sarah Strong, for example. She had such a massive postseason last year that, Final Four and the national championship were her 2 best games and most impactful games of the season. And I could always rationalize that and saying, well, she's not really a freshman anymore. Of course, she is a freshman, and of course, it's her first tournament play, but she has an entire season under her belt that it's almost like she is playing like a vet. I never thought about the other side of it, of when you are so new, you are so fresh, you are so green, you're playing with this sense of freedom, you're playing with this sense of weightlessness that you're not really burdened by anything else. You're just like, hey, look, I'm a freshman, let me go out there and ball and do what I do.
Absolutely. It's house money. And when you have someone who's a coach, Brenda Fries famously loves playing her freshmen and just putting them out there and saying go. But USC is really trying to find an identity right now. That's what Lindsey Gottlieb said after the game. Juju's on the bench. We lost a lot of people. We're really young. we're trying to figure out exactly who's getting the ball when and how much people have responsibility. And so I think it's also that Jazzy Davidson can kind of go and make a big splash and know that like she doesn't have all of that on her shoulders. The expectations aren't sky high, especially because I don't think people are expecting a lot out of USC this year without Juju Watkins. And she looked really like she was having fun. Like it was fun watching her, for me at least. It's so cool watching her, just like those Spider-Man arms just everywhere, go gadget arms. It was very, very fun to watch her defend in isolation. I could do it all day.
Do you remember Betty Spaghetti Dolls?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. That's a good
one.
What that's
she
a good
reminds
one.
Me
yeah.
of. And I say that with all of the love in my heart. That is not poking fun at her at all.
No.
But she's long and lanky, and she reminds me of a Betty Spaghetti doll.
Yeah.
Important to point out, too, because while I think Jazzy Davidson is the story of the game for me, and she will very well continue to be the story of this USC team, I want to point out London Jones and the 19-point effort that she had off the bench. When London Jones transfers in from UCLA, it's impressive to see. And of course, she's a vet. This is year 5 for her in college basketball. Like, she knows what she's doing, but it's also coming in the form of a different team. And that can take a ramping up period, which is, I think, important context to add in the non-con when we are so early. But these not just the freshmen are trying to figure out what their roles are. So many of these transfers are trying to figure out what their roles are with the new head coach, with the new system. So London Jones, 19 points off the bench. Ava, I think that was really ultimately the difference in this game was USC getting contribution from the bench versus NC State not getting as much. I mean, NC State had 54 rebounds to USC's 40. I mean, that could tell the story alone in a game. I mean, 94 total rebounds in a game is absolutely insane. But it was London Jones off the bench that felt like the biggest differentiator to me in this one.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. If Jazzy Davidson, especially she's going to start attracting more and more attention, you do kind of need someone who can kind of operate a little bit. I don't want to call it under the radar, but just because Davidson is going to attract so many eyes and going to be this the focus of so many defenses, London Jones can do a lot of work. Kennedy Smith, USC's, I think, lone starter who came back this year, really did a lot of kind of grounding play. I thought she was really a really nice veteran presence. But they only had 18% of their offense come back. So it was kind of definitely a thing where it's like, you want the ball, you want to score, you get to score. And London Jones definitely was like, yes, thank you. I would love to. I appreciate that.
I will take the ball. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Look at this NC State team, though. I mean, like, their non-con schedule is pretty intense. They open up the season against Tennessee, get a big win against Tennessee, and then USC. They got a win over Maine, kind of a get-right game there, and then they take on number 17, TCU. What would be your evaluation of NC State where we can see them right now? We have 2 games against Power 4 non-conference opponents, a win over Tennessee and a narrow loss against USC. What do you make of NC State where we are right now?
Yeah, and that narrow loss is, I mean, Coach Westmore knows what he's doing. That narrow loss is not necessarily going to count against them. I don't think USC is going to kind of take a nosedive, and that's going to look like a bad loss down when we get to March and February and things. So it's interesting that they're testing themselves. They look good. I mean, listen, Zoe Brooks had 24 points, 11 rebounds. Camille Pierre is playing really, really well. And they just... It was the boneheaded missing free throws. You're going to be thinking about that for days and days after, but that's not necessarily something that you look at as a problem that's kind of going to sit with you all season. They looked good. They looked ferocious on defense. They looked a little bit tired down the stretch. That's something that happens when a young team gets excited and gets really hot, I think, like USC. But that's something that NC State can learn from, and it's early, and I think the testing themselves is only going to pay off. They've had really, really good games so far.
That's why you play these games, because NC State has a grind of an ACC schedule coming up. But once they get into that, they're going to be, this is no problem. We've already played TCU, Tennessee, USC. We've already been tested. We know what we need to work on. So, I mean, like you said, they know what they're doing over there at NC State. Let's move on to another battle of some more heavyweights. Number 6, Oklahoma. Number 3, UCLA. And I was so excited for this one to watch Reagan Beers and Lauren Betts. The battle of 2 bigs, battle of 2 centers. And credit to Reagan Beers. She was able to hold Lauren Betts in check for a majority of this one. 9 points, 10 rebounds. in Lauren Betts' world is kind of a quiet game. I know that sounds crazy that a near double-double does feel like a quiet game, but Reagan Beers, for the most part, was able to hold Lauren Betts in check. But to me, it was all about we were able to see from UCLA transfer Gianna Needkins, a transfer from Utah. She had a massive game, 20 points, 4 rebounds, and assists. Overall takeaways from a massive, massive win for UCLA that they were able to get without massive contributions from their big and their star player, Lauren Betts, over a top 10 team in Oklahoma.
Yeah, you said it. Credit to Reagan Beers and also credit to Lauren Betts. I feel like the two bigs that I was waiting for this big battle between kind of canceled each other out. And this game really became about the guards. Gianna Needkins quickly became one of my I'm like, oh, I am tuning into this team to watch this guard play. Her handle was fantastic. She had one incredible possession where she just juked out Aaliyah Chavez in a way. I was like, show me that 6 more times. But her decision-making was excellent. Her hands are just she just got a great handle. It was really fun. One of the more exciting kind of guards I've seen that made me sit up and say, oh, I'm sorry, I hadn't been watching you, Utah. I was not familiar with your game. But she was really, really fun. She only needed, she had 14 shots to get 20 points. She's also coming into a situation where she's kind of not going to be number 1 or number 2 for the first time at Utah. She really did carry a lot of that load. So to kind of be able to take her opportunity and say, okay, Lauren Betts is over here. Great. This is my time to shine. I can handle myself here. I can take the ball up the court. It's not necessarily always going to be like that with UCLA, but man, Corey Close has got to be so happy knowing that she has someone who can kind of take over when she needs to and just add a little bit more balance. Kiki Rice had a pretty good game. But yeah, Needkins had 2 straight 20-point games. That is really, really impressive coming on to a UCLA squad, especially they're starting 5 seniors. It's not like a team that doesn't know what they're doing. That's hard to kind of to elbow your way in there. But she was a fun one. I was like, ooh, this is great.
It was so fun. And a team of a lot of seniors that have played a lot of basketball together. You mentioned Kiki Rice, Gabby Hawkes also in that conversation,
yes.
Obviously Lauren Betts. That it does feel like now UCLA has so many players that they can go to and can take over a game at any given moment. We saw that in the tournament last year with Gabby Hawkes stepping up in big-time moments, Kiki Rice stepping up in big-time moments. Lauren Betts is going to be the focal point of what you do with everything, of course, because that's just the kind of player that Lauren Betts is. But I think as hard as it is to limit what Lauren Betts does when she is limited, as we saw against Oklahoma, they have other players that can step up. And it feels like Gianna Needkins is that one added little razzle-dazzle, like the nice little cherry on top of this already really strong and deep unit, that it's just another player that they can go to.
And it was such a contrast with Oklahoma. Oklahoma returns 4 starters, I think, but they are really young. They have 5 freshmen. And it was just seeing those kind of guards where Aaliyah Chavez, someone who I've been super, super excited to watch, kind of figuring it out still. She's got great hands. She plays with a ton of pace. She just loves to push and go. She is still kind of, I feel like, learning when is the best time to take her shot, when's the best time to kind of pass it off. She took a lot of, she launched a lot of balls as soon as she kind of crossed the half court. And a couple of those you wanted to say, look around and see who else was open at the time. But it wasn't when Oklahoma kind of started running out of steam a little bit. I'm like, yes, here's where the youth is coming in. Here's what kind of, I was interested to see how Oklahoma would go here. So Aaliyah Chavez, clearly so much talent. I really, really love her speed. But she's just kind of she's got a lot of learning to do, which makes a lot of sense.
And we'll get into conference races. Of course, the SEC is going to be in that conversation. Looks again to be an incredibly deep conference. And I feel like when we talk about the SEC, obviously South Carolina dominates a lot of that conversation. Texas dominates a lot of that conversation. Of course, 2 teams represented in the Final Four last year. Tennessee's in the conversation. LSU is in the conversation. Where it's so early. But early on, where do you feel like Oklahoma kind of fits in the ecosystem of the SEC hierarchy?
That's a tough question because the SEC hierarchy, that's a tough one. Was it last week you were talking about they're just going to go and beat each other up before the Final Four anyway? So it's
they're all exhausted at that point.
I'm going to be watching the SEC all season. It's going to be so fun. And then I'm like, okay, great. And now it's time for the other teams who are a little bit fresher to come into play.
Yes. Now let's pay attention to UConn.
Yeah. I feel like just by the virtue of the fact that they're so young, Oklahoma definitely has a lot of catching up to do. Like Texas, you've got a lot of return. You've got Maddie Booker who came back, Rory Harmon who's running the show, who's in like, I think she's only in her 5th year. She's like a graduate student who has the eligibility of a senior. I don't know.
Who knows
She's been
anymore?
there for a long time.
Yeah, right.
Madison Booker has been around too. They've got Oldacre inside who's just absolutely knows what she's doing. And it's kind of the same thing with LSU. Like that team has been together for a while. Their core has been there. They've got some good veterans. So just by virtue of the fact that despite that Oklahoma has those 4 starters who are coming back and Reagan Beers kind of anchoring them. So I'm interested to see where they fall. Just having a young point guard kind of running your attack. I've got questions. I'm looking forward to watching Oklahoma more. How about that? To see what they're going to figure out about themselves.
It does feel like Oklahoma fits in not in that elite tier or that upper tier of the SEC, but they are right there. And I'm just waiting for them to break through. Not to say that they can't or they won't. I'm just waiting for them to do it. And I think that speaks to the depth of this conference and how competitive this conference is going to be, is that this team that finds itself kind of just under the teams that we feel very confident in, and they are the number 6 team in the country. So,
right, I was just going to say, and the SEC's second tier is like the Big Ten's what tier is that? Like,
yeah,
I'm
the
just
Big Ten's like S tier.
Right, sure, exactly, yeah. So it's just the SEC is tough, and I can't wait to watch. I'm
so excited for it. I'm ready for it, but I don't want to like fast forward through these non-con games because I think we learn a lot. And 2 games where maybe we didn't learn a lot, but it was just solidified what I feel like I already knew, at least early on. We know it's early, a lot of basketball left to be played, so take all of this with a grain of salt. But Clemson at South Carolina, and then we had UConn and Florida State. And these were 2 games that we can kind of lump together because obviously UConn and South Carolina, 2 of the best teams in the country, 2 legitimate national championship contenders. I thought, okay, what are we going to learn about these 2 teams? Because Florida State had the best offense in women's college basketball last year. Of course, they lose their leading scorer in Tania Latson, but I thought Florida State wants to stretch the court. They want to play very high. They want to, shoot the 3. They play this very, Golden State Warriors type of style. How does UConn respond to that? Same thing with Clemson. I've been really impressed with what we've seen from Mia Moore early. Could Clemson maybe be a sleeper team in the ACC? I thought maybe we might learn something about Florida State or Clemson taking on these legitimate national title contenders. Pure and utter dominance from UConn and South Carolina. Maybe what I thought I might learn about these other teams, it was very much so learned. Nope, UConn and South Carolina just are those girls. They are that good.
And I was watching Clemson USC last night, and I was like, "Ooh, Dawn's stomping already. She looks mad. Why does she always look so mad? Her team's so good." And I'm like, this is a good sign. This is a good sign. It means that something's happening here. I think I had to like pause the game in the 3rd quarter to turn away and do something, and I like fast forwarded to the 4th quarter. I was like, oh no, Clemson hasn't scored since I left the room. Oh, that's not good. That defense just looked really good. Early on, Clemson kept up because they were making 3s when South Carolina was pushing them outside and kind of clogging up the paint. And listen, South Carolina is going to do that. If you can make your 3s, you're going to hang with them for a while. But that defense just got really, really suffocating. And South Carolina did not miss a beat. Latson's fitting in beautifully. I feel like we're seeing so many transfers who are just like gliding in like across the country. Like Maryland's got some, UConn's even making the best of their transfers. Like transfers are really showing up this year. But South Carolina just same old. Same with UConn. Sarah Strong and AZ Fudd. We're going to be saying it all season. Like I think KK Arnold kind of it didn't show up in the box score, but she's I think junior this year, and she really looks like she's itching to have a breakout season. But locked and loaded.
I mean, it's reload, not rebuild. I mean, AZ Fudd, 23 points. Sarah Strong, 21, 9, and 4. It's going to be that duo. We're going to be talking a lot about those 2 and what they do and the contributions of both of them. I mean, UConn just absolutely stifling Florida State. I mean, South Carolina held Clemson to 37 points.
Yep.
Not in the first half.
That'll do it.
37 points in an entire game. That will do it. And you bring up transfers. I mean, Tania Latson, I'm with you, has fit in so beautifully with the, her and Joyce Edwards and the way that both of them can really move the ball and score. Medina Okot is another one that I didn't really think a whole lot about going into this season, but Medina Okada transferred from Mississippi State. She's 6'6". With Chloe Kitts out for the season with an ACL tear, it kind of feels like she's going to be filling in that post presence kind of role, and she did it so wonderfully against Clemson. She overall her final stats 12 points, 12 rebounds. Again, like that will do it. She has a double-double in 2 of the last 3 games. Again, I know it's early, but South Carolina, one question I had was who is going to be filling in that kind of big role with Chloe Kitts out, Medina Okot early filling in.
And it's so interesting. South Carolina, until the last couple years, really was not one of those teams that had historically relied on transfers. And obviously, you're going to see more and more of that kind of no matter what, as just the transfer portal continues to go crazy. But Dawn Staley's system was always predicated on you wait your turn, you learn what you're supposed to do, you kind of have the spirit of the program imbibed within you so you understand who you're playing for and what's at stake and you really care. And it turns out it works the other way too. I was just like, oh, no problem. You don't have to do all of that. It turns out we're just rolling along here. But it has been really interesting to me to see that program kind of take on these more, I don't want to call them plug and play players because I think they do a ton of work over the offseason, but people who you can just kind of slip right into the system and really make it work.
And it works kind of with at least what we saw last year, maybe the year prior with South Carolina. They'll go deep on their bench.
Oh, yeah.
And that takes a lot of team chemistry. That takes having a lot of players that you can trust in any given moment. I don't think there's anybody better at that in women's college basketball than Dawn Staley. And her players will tell you that as well.
And that's exactly what these non-conference games are for. I know that was against Clemson, but that's where coaches are kind of learning who they can trust. That was the only thing that I've kind of lit up in my brain about NC State, just to return to them really quickly, is Wes Moore hasn't gone really beyond his top 6 players. And I know he's had kind of bigger non-conference games than a lot of other teams so far. But that's another thing. You have to test yourself. You have to try out your roster, see who works together. And NC State has that really good schedule, but it's also, are you finding out enough about your bench, things like that? Those are the things that coaches are weighing. And it's another reason to kind of love this time of year for college basketball.
There's a ton of strategy depending on the depth and strength of your conference, I think. With UConn, the Big East isn't going to challenge UConn the way that the SEC will challenge South Carolina or the way that the ACC will challenge NC State. So UConn has a different approach to the non-con than I think those other 2 programs and those other conferences. So the strategy of it all, of how many games are we trying to win to bolster up our resume right now versus are we in it for the long haul, understanding that we'll have plenty of opportunities to boost our resume once we get into conference play. But speaking of conference play, it is among us. I don't want to fast forward on some of these great non-conference games, but when we look at the grand scheme of women's college basketball, what is the one conference, if you have to just pick one, what's the one conference that you are most excited to watch shake out?
Oh, for me, it's the SEC. It is the SEC, no doubt. I know that's the easy one to say. That's because it's the correct one to say.
Yes.
I'm interested to see in kind of those top 3 or 4 teams really slug it out over the season. I'm also so interested. It's just such a tough conference, and there are schools that have, this is true across the board, but I feel like especially in the SEC, there are schools that have such big football money where I feel like the disparity between the level of investment in the program can actually vary quite widely within the conference. But I'm always really excited to see, okay, who's going to be the program that kind of makes the leap, not necessarily gets to the top tier, but can you raise the level of what you did last year? So I'm watching Vanderbilt. I'm so interested in seeing what LSU does this year. Are they going to kind of worm themselves back into the national conversation while we're all distracted with the Final Four teams from last year? But there are some really, really fun players. I keep talking about Vanderbilt. It's because of Michaela Blake's, of course. 2 50-point games under her belt already.
Just stop there. 2 50-point games under her belt already.
As a freshman, not a big deal. Yeah. But she lost her 2 other top scorers, entered the transfer portal last year. Yep. They were like, I would like to also score some, maybe. So I'm so interested in how kind of Vanderbilt makes that adjustment and what we see from them. Again, we already talked about seeing how Oklahoma grows. If Texas gets back to the Final Four, are they a little bit more ready for the moment this time? Because it really felt like you said, after that SEC tournament, they just they had bad losses at the end of the season last year. So I'm interested to see how they come back. But yeah, it's fast, it's physical. SEC women's basketball. That's it for me.
It's the SEC, and just ignore the helmet that I have behind me. I'm an SEC graduate. I get it. You always have a little bit of that. It just means more in you, but it is the SEC. It's the star power that we have in the SEC on the court and on the sidelines. I mean, when you have a conference with Dawn Staley, with Vic Schaefer, with Kim Mulkey.
I was like, when are you going to say Kim Mulkey?
Kim Mulkey,
Come on.
obviously. Hello. Sam Purcell at Mississippi State. Jenny Baranchek at Oklahoma. We have so many. Kenny Brooks at Kentucky. I absolutely adore Kenny Brooks and what he's been building at Kentucky.
Brooks, yeah.
He's the best.
And that's another school that is investing in its program. They just built a new arena last year. They sold out so many games last year. That was a really fun atmosphere.
And bringing in Georgia Amore last year, I mean, she added just like such a sense of electricity into that team. So the depth of this conference, the personalities in this conference, the difference in basketball identity in this conference. And you look at the way that Vic Schaefer wants to play at Texas, very low scoring, a whole lot of defense. And you might compare that to maybe the way that Coach Yo wants to operate her team at Ole Miss, another coach that I just
talk about a character.
A character. I adore Coach Yo, just who she is as a person and also what she's done for this basketball program. That she has made Ole Miss women's basketball must-see television and the must-go-to event in Oxford, Mississippi. So it's everything that this conference has to offer. But I also don't want to ignore the ACC. When you have Carol Lawson at Duke, you have Toby Fournier coming back from her Rookie of the Year campaign last season, when you have NC State, a top 10 team, when you have North Carolina, that was a tournament team last year, Miami, Notre Dame, again, so many personalities at head coaches, at the head coaching positions, and you also have such a depth of teams that if you ask me today to pick one of these teams that will ultimately win the conference, I don't know who I would pick, genuinely. And I think that's what makes such a conference race so fun, is the fact that you have so many legitimate contenders in the conference and nationally.
Yeah, I'm looking ahead to that UNC UCLA game. Like, yes, that's going to be good. No, ACC is really fun. And you said you're an SEC graduate. Sadly, I'm a Big Ten graduate. Not.
We love the Big Ten.
We love the Big Ten, but I'm always just like, okay, it's going to be UCLA and. Great. No, Maryland's doing really well. We're down the street from College Park here in DC. They've got a couple of transfers who look like they've been at that program forever. They're not going on the road that much during the non-conference season. So they're kind of really depending on conference play to kind of get their resume up before the end of the year there. But I love that Michigan team. Notre Dame's going to be super fun coming up this week. Big Ten, just seeing who's for second place. That's a fun race in itself too.
And that's the race. Last year was so fun watching USC and UCLA. Like, who's it going to be? Every time they played, it was much-watch TV, even when it was at 10 o'clock Eastern time. But this year, it's now that Juju Watkins will not be on the court for USC, who is contending against UCLA. I think that in and of itself is fun to watch. Anytime UCLA is on the court. Huge opportunity. Yeah. And anytime any of these teams, I mean, just period, non-con, but especially in conference play, every Big Ten team will have UCLA circled on their schedules. They will be getting their best. They will be getting every single team's best shot. So it'll be fascinating to see how UCLA kind of handles that big stage, how they handle the fact that they're going to get the hardest and biggest swing from every single team that they play.
And they have to do all that travel. I know we talk about it all the time in college football and everything else, but that really adds up by the end of the season. Like, they're going to be getting beat up on the court, and then they have to go fly 6 hours to get home every day. It's a lot for UCLA. It's a really good test.
We talk about it a lot, and I think it's for good reason.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard.
Exhausting.
I mean, it's an overwhelming advantage for those teams on the West Coast. USC and UCLA in the Big Ten, Cal and Stanford in the ACC, which makes so much sense. But it's an overwhelming home court advantage, but you also have to do it, So I think that we talk about it for a reason because it matters. But I think it's the SEC and the ACC are the most fascinating conference matchups to watch how those kind of unfold. But Big Ten, let's see what you got. Big 12, TCU.
TCU, I am interested in TCU and Baylor. Baylor, it feels like, are you going to maximize your potential this year? You're a veteran team. You're coming in. You've got some really exciting players, but it does feel like, and I kind of feel the same way about UCLA. There's a window here. I don't know how long the window is going to be open. So can you make it happen this year? I'm interested to see that. With that, that's what I think of when I think of TCU.
And I'm waiting for in the Big 12 because, TCU, Baylor, Iowa State, Oklahoma
Sure.
State, like
Mhm.
which are these other teams that start to be in our consistent conversation nationally? That's another fun thing that I'm going to be waiting to watch. Who else can contend in the Big 12? Fascinating conference matchups, though. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't want to fast forward again. I've said it a million times. I don't want to fast forward through the non-com, but it does feel like once conference play tips off, it's getting real. It gets really real. Ava, we don't just talk women's college basketball on this pod, even though we love women's hoops. Want to touch on some WNBA news.
Let's do it.
Because we now know that Chicago will be hosting WNBA All-Star in 2026. Chicago just hosted WNBA All-Star in 2022. There were a lot of reports coming out that Chicago was the only city and the only team to put a bid in for the 2026 WNBA All-Star game. You don't have the answer to it, and I don't have the answer to it. I don't think anybody has the answer to it. But the question that I have is why? Why is Chicago the only city to put a bid in for WNBA All-Star?
It, like you said, we don't have the answers. We have good guesses, and it has to be something about money and just the effort and the investment that it takes to put on a weekend full, because it's not, it's All-Star weekend. It's a weekend full of events. You're advertising beforehand. You're paying for people to stay in hotels. You're paying for hotel blocks. When you buy an All-Star ticket, you can use this code to book at this partnership. It's a lot for teams and cities. And even though teams split operational costs with the league, it's a huge, huge, huge production to put on an All-Star game. I think Chicago's really smart to do it, especially when you have Angel Reese. So we have the Indiana Pacers who hosted last year, and we'll have Angel Reese's team here this year. That makes a lot of sense. You can attract a lot of kind of movers and shakers to Chicago for that weekend. It's a fabulous city to host especially in the summertime. Let's go.
Maybe no more NBA All-Star games in Chicago.
Right. Yeah,
but July, lovely.
Yeah, well, I'm there, but so it makes a lot of sense for Chicago, but it is a little disappointing just to hear that there's not that kind of infighting between teams in the league saying, no, I want to do this. No, we want to turn. We want to have all the fans. We know that they do really well on TV. We know that it's a really great atmosphere. So it's just a bummer, and it has to do with operational costs, especially when there's so much uncertainty in the league this year. I wouldn't be surprised if teams are kind of sitting back and saying, maybe this isn't the place where we want to invest right now if we're going to be committing so much more money to player salaries and all of these other things that are being negotiated. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that franchise owners are thinking about as well. But it feels a little bit like a bummer because there's so much momentum and things are sprouting off that you want to feel like the league wants to be a part of it. And I feel like more and more these days, it feels like the league is kind of sitting back on its heels and doing what franchise owners and business people and leagues do, which is protect their bottom line, which, again, makes a lot of sense from their perspective. From the fan perspective, though, it's a little bit of a bummer.
It is, especially for a league that is experiencing unprecedented growth. You would want that. You would want every or as many possible cities to benefit from that growth. I think about San Francisco. The Golden State Valkyries are the blueprint to a successful expansion team. They were selling out all of their home games. Their expansion fee was $50 million. Their valuation now sits at $500 million, and we're talking about the difference of one calendar year. Like, they are the blueprint that I think Portland and Toronto and all these expansion teams should be following. I think if I'm the WNBA, I want to continue to build upon that momentum, bring even more eyes to Golden State, really galvanize that fan base and bring even more fan bases into Golden State. Now, I do understand that they split operational costs, but at what point does the WNBA look at it and say, we're willing to maybe take a larger financial hit just to continue to capitalize on this growth? That comes from me, an optimist and somebody that likes to look at things glass half full and likes to look at things in a very holistic point of view. But I understand it's not WNBA.gov, right? It is WNBA is looking for a profit, and these individual teams are looking for a profit. But if you look at the last 7 All-Star games, 2019, Vegas. 2021, of course, there was no 2020 All-Star game because of COVID. 2021, Vegas. 2022, Chicago. 2023, Vegas. 2024, Phoenix, then Indy, now back to Chicago. That is nothing against Chicago. That is nothing against Vegas or Phoenix or Indy or any of these cities that have hosted in the last several years. I love Chicago. I think Chicago is great. And credit to Chicago for being the city and the team to stand up and say, we want to do it. We want to host this event. I just would love for other cities to stand up. Where's LA? Where's New York? Where's Seattle with Sue Bird retiring?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just erected a statue for Sue Bird up front. You want to continue to, keep her involved and keep Seattle in the good graces of the WNBA and to continue to be in the headlines? I'm just wondering, some of these big time cities that have been, lifers in the WNBA. Atlanta.
Yeah.
Where are these cities? Why can't they stand up and say, we want to be part of this? And you're right. The only thing that I can conclude is it is just not worth it financially. The burden that it is, the cost and the investment that it is financially to host it is not worth what they're going to get from it. And I hate that.
I am so with you on that. I do think there is actually an interesting kind of discussion to be had here in terms of things like the Final Four, which return to a lot of the same cities. I'm kind of one of those people who's like, maybe Vegas should just host, most things just because it's a great fan environment. We were talking about, we were both at the Women's Final Four this year, which the last time I was there was the second Enrique year. And it was so, you could just so see how the women's basketball ecosystem had changed from 2019 to 2024. I do think there is kind of a familiarity for fans in saying, okay, I know the lay of this land. I know where everything's going to be. It's fun to kind of it almost feels like a meetup with your friends to return to the same places year after year. So there is something to say for that. But I'm with you where it's sometimes it's just the fact that you want teams to feel like they're excited to be investing alongside their fans. And I know that the economics of the WNBA are, I guess actually I don't know because they don't they don't make them public and they make it hard for reporters to find too. But I'm saying I understand their bottom line. And like you said, this is a business, not a charity. But yeah, it would be nice to hear that teams are clamoring to host All-Star for sure.
And just, we don't know the economics, but just what we hear can give us enough of a peek behind the curtain to come up with our own conclusions. I was reading Annie Constable's piece in Front Office Sports, which is really kind of brought to light the All-Star game and, the financials, the economics of the All-Star game. And the president of the Phoenix Mercury said, quote, a ton of props to Chicago for what they're undertaking. If we didn't have the resources of our entire organization and Player 15 group, which is the ownership group of the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Mercury, we would not have been able to put on the All-Star game the size and scope of which we did. To do that as an independent team, that's a massive undertaking manpower-wise. Just based off of that quote and the verbiage used, a massive undertaking gives me enough context to understand this is a lot. This is hard. This is, the word burden is maybe overly dramatic, but it is a financial undertaking to host this event. And
I don't necessarily think burden. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
I don't think burden is an understatement. It's a huge undertaking, and just from covering the Wizards and the Mystics, I know the way, especially with teams that have shared NBA, WNBA ownership. It's not like you have a whole separate staff dedicated to this. Most of the time, those people work for the parent company and they work on the NBA side all year, and then they do the WNBA side, and everyone's burnt out and run down, and you're sharing resources. And so for an independent team who maybe doesn't even have, has the same kind of resources but doesn't have that financial backing, that's it's just an enormous thing to be able to pull off. I am really glad that they're going to get the Chicago Sky, which is such a fun team and a really, really fantastic fan base, get Angel Reese the shine. I mean, that's going to be really fun. I hope she is out every day doing stuff, just bringing all the glitz and glamour. I hope she brings all of her famous friends and everything like that. Just give me the live podcast. Yes. I want all of that. That's really, really smart. And I hope WNBA teams kind of look at that and say, is there a way we can figure out and do this? There might not be in terms of how much money all these teams have to dedicate to that, but it would be cool if Chicago puts on a show that makes other people say, oh, we want in.
And I think they can. And, the part of me thinks, okay, well, Chicago is an independent team. How can they do it? Twice in the span of less than 5 years. Yet there are some of these other teams that are under an ownership group of an NBA ownership, and by that do have, a better financial situation, and they can't. It just wants so badly another city to step up, but this is a wonderful opportunity for Chicago, especially a team and an organization that hasn't been in the best headlines over the last several months.
No, they haven't.
There's a lot of PR maybe washing that we want to do here. So credit to Chicago for taking the initiative to put themselves in the position to be in, a better conversation in the media's view. And I do hope that Angel Reese is like, look, I have these brand sponsorships, which with X, Y, and Z brands, they're going to come in and they're going to throw these big parties. They're going to have booths. They're going to have giveaways. This is going to be a place to be, not just in the world for the WNBA, but in the world of sports. I hope what Chicago is able to do is prove to all of these other cities. You want to tell me that the New York Liberty and Los Angeles Sparks don't maybe have some big time hookups with big time names with big time connections? Hello, let's use those. Let's flex those muscles. Let's make this a destination place because the WNBA is growing. I think brands and people, they want to be attached to the brand that is the WNBA. So I hope that Chicago starts to blaze that trail.
I'm calling this the big time hookup dance from now on. Give me the big time hookups.
Big time, famous friends. Get your rich friends here. Come on. Let's get things moving here.
The big time hookup dance. That's what we need in the WNBA. Yeah, that's what we need. We just need everyone to tap their network. We have to. You need to.
Yes. Come on, everybody. Let's pull a little bit of those strings. Yeah. Something fascinating to follow. And I would love to hear a little bit more of the behind the scenes of the finances of any sort of All-Star game for the league, for an individual team, and really for a city. It's not a cheap thing for a city to put on either. It's logistically difficult, financially difficult. So fascinating to follow. We have some massive games coming up over the next week that we'll react to on next week's edition of the show. Maybe a couple of games that you're keeping an eye on in the women's college basketball space.
South Carolina, USC, I think it's 9 p.m. on Saturday. And I'm just like, well, I guess that's what I'm doing on Saturday night because I will be there. That's going to be really fun. Ohio State, UConn is going to be interesting. Ohio State, always feisty, always talking about the conference races. You look up at the end of the Big Ten season and you're like, oh, Ohio State's really good. And that's on me for not having watched more Big Ten. And then TCU, NC State, what are you doing? Give yourself a rest. Give yourself a break.
Tired?
But I'm fascinated to see how they handle that one after two already really big non-conference tests. But man, it's so fun this time of year. This is great. This is fantastic. November. We love it. So
fun. We love November. We will give thanks to that. South Carolina, USC, the Battle of the USCs, that is the one. If you have one game to watch this week, that is going to be the one to keep an eye on. I'm also looking at Notre Dame, Michigan. I mean, both two teams that are undefeated at this point. Notre Dame, I know, really high hopes and high expectations for their season, and it starts now. So a bunch of fun games to keep an eye on that game. Notre Dame, Michigan. The game is also on Saturday at 4:00 Eastern time. Ava, you are wonderful. You are the best. It's always been a blast. Where can people find some more of your work?
You can follow me at Ava R. Wallace. That's where you're going to find me talking about a lot of things like this on Instagram. You can also go to thewashingtonpost.com/sports. We're covering women's college ball. We're covering WNBA, CBA. Just all the sports that you could possibly want. And thank you so much for having me. Always a delight.
If you're new to the show, thanks for stopping by. If you come by every week, appreciate you as well. But just a reminder to everybody that you can send in any questions, comments, anything that's on your mind. You can send that to us every single week to hoops360@yahoosports.com. We'll get to as many of your questions, comments, and concerns every single week. Again, that is HOOPS360@yahoosports.com. Appreciate y'all. See you next week.